Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. Prime Minister Modi chairs the first Cabinet Committee on Security meeting post-Operation Sindoor. The Chief of Defence Staff and heads of the tri-services brief President Murmu about India's military action against Pakistan. The BSF soldier who had been detained by Pakistan after inadvertently crossing the border last month handed over to Indian authorities. The US announces investments worth $600 billion from Saudi Arabia. This includes an arms deal worth $140 billion. Trump, who's in West Asia, reiterates claims that the US helped broker the ceasefire between India and Pakistan, tells Fox News, and I quote, "I told them that we can do better with peace. They agreed," end of quote. Indian equities end flat after a highly volatile session as the focus turns to earnings. Stock-specific action in focus today. The Nifty and the Sensex end with marginal gains. The rupee continues to strengthen as dollar selling by exporters offsets dollar buying by importers. The Cabinet clears HCL and Foxconn Semiconductor joint venture worth 3,706 crore rupees, paves the way for a plant in UP's Jewar, which would be India's sixth chip-making facility. The plant is likely to have a monthly manufacturing capacity of 36 million chips and is expected to create 2,000 direct jobs. Automaker Tata Motors says it will focus on new launches in its passenger vehicle business to keep competition at bay and deliver better than expected growth. Indicates that launches in the EV space will be a priority, adding that JLR will look at expanding into other markets and step up operations in the UK and EU to offset the hit from US tariffs. Microsoft cut over 6,000 jobs across departments, levels and geographies. This will be its second largest layoff exercise. The company says this is part of organizational changes necessary to best position itself for a dynamic marketplace. Israel resumes airstrikes after briefly pausing military action in Gaza for the release of the last known American hostage in Hamas captivity. Over 60 people, including children, are killed overnight. The European hospital complex in Khan Yunis was struck as well. Israel claims it targeted a Hamas command center that was operating under the hospital. Russia and Ukraine continue to trade fire even as Ukraine's Zelensky agrees to travel to Turkey to meet with Russian President Putin. Russia is yet to decide on attending. European leaders threaten tighter sanctions on Russia if it fails to agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. Justice B.R. Gavai takes oath as the 52nd Chief Justice of India. He's the first practicing Buddhist and the second person from the scheduled caste community to lead the nation's judicial system. He will have a short tenure of just over 6 months. Well, straight to the top story this evening. Prime Minister Modi chaired the first Cabinet Committee on Security meeting since India and Pakistan halted their military action. Now, the government has already rejected claims that the US and China intervened to broker a ceasefire deal between the two sides. Chief of Defence Staff Anil Chauhan and the Tri-Services Chiefs briefed President Draupadi Murmu about Operation Sindoor. The President commended the valour and dedication of the armed forces. Reports suggest that the security of External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has been beefed up after a review of his Z category cover. Security has also been tightened at the Paradip port in Orissa after a ship with 21 crew members arrived with crude oil for Indian Oil Corporation. No crew was allowed to leave the ship. And Abhimanyu Sharma joins us now with the latest developments. Abhimanyu, take us to what transpired at that CCS meeting and some of the other crucial developments in the India-Pak standoff and where things currently stand.
A meeting of the CCS and the Union Cabinet concluded some time back at the Prime Minister's residence. This was the second meeting held after the commencement of the Operation Sindoor and the fourth meeting held after the terror attack in Pahalgam. While there is a pause on hostilities between India and Pakistan, the pause continues on military action. However, the vigil has been stepped up across the land, sea and air borders by different forces to ensure no misadventure or untoward incident by any element. It remains to be seen how the situation is going to pan out, even as de-escalation efforts continue from India's side. Also, India's BSF Jawan, who was held by the Pakistani forces, has been released. And in another development, India had expelled an official working with the Pakistani High Commission in New Delhi. And a similar action in retaliation has also been taken by Pakistan. So clearly, de-escalation efforts are continuing, but still there is skepticism over the reactions by Pakistan and the kind of provocative statements which have been made by several Pakistani leaders and the entire Pakistani leadership in the recent past. Also, India till now has rejected any efforts or claims by any other country to intervene between India and Pakistan as far as dispute resolution is concerned, be it countries like United States or China. So clearly, de-escalation efforts are being looked at and the vigil continues to be high on the Indian side.
Abhimanyu, many thanks. US President Trump reiterating his earlier claim that he did a good job convincing India and Pakistan to pause military operations. In an interview with Fox News on board Air Force One, Trump reiterated that he did not like what was happening between the two nations. Trump's comments during an interview to Fox News come in the middle of his official visit to West Asia since becoming the president for the second time. Yesterday, he signed a $142 billion defense sales agreement with Saudi Arabia. The kingdom has pledged an overall investment commitment of $600 billion in the US. Speaking at the summit in Riyadh, President Trump also announced plans to lift sanctions on Syria following the fall of the Assad regime. He met Syrian President al-Shara before he departed for Qatar's Doha. President Trump is also expected to travel to the United Arab Emirates later this week. He also issued a strong message to Iran.
I want to make a deal with Iran. If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy if we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure, drive Iranian oil exports to zero like I did before. If you know that, they were a virtually bankrupt country because of what I did. They had no money for terror. They had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah.
Well, that is President Trump speaking in Saudi Arabia. On to the day's market action. Indian equities ending the day flat after a volatile session. The Sensex and the Nifty ending with marginal gains, while the mid-cap index rose more than 1%. That's the story there. 88 points higher for the Nifty. The Sensex 180 points higher. The Nifty Bank down 139. It's a 600-point uptick on the mid-caps. Financials underperformed today. That's the story for our market. Surbi standing by now to wrap up the market action for us. Surbi.
Well, middle of the week, and it was another quiet day. Quiet, especially if you were looking at the large cap screen, and not so quiet and fairly pleasant and green for the mid caps today. The market is consolidating at the Nifty level, which is why for most parts of it, the index was either flat or up about 0.2, 0.3%. But like I'm saying, it's the broader market action being driven by specific stock news, by earnings. And that index, the mid-cap index, was up 1%. And the advance decline ratio was very strong, over 3 stocks advancing for every one that was declining. Once again, defense was the clear, favored part of the market. Today, the Nifty Defense Index was up about 2.5%. If you talk about the gains so far this week, then this index has put on about 8%. That's the sense of buying. And a couple of good earnings, for instance, Garden Reach Shipbuilders, they've only added to the sentiment and the excitement around this space. In fact, the defense stocks that were really up and about today included names like Garden Reach, Cochin Shipyard, and even HAL. The Achilles heel for the market is proving to be banks once again. The Bank Nifty was underperforming. It actually ended down with a minor red cut as well. And the question here is FPI flows. And I'm going to come back to this point in just a second. But let's complete the Nifty tally. The gainers today included Tata Motors, Shriram Finance. A lot of the metal and material stocks are doing very well. So whether it is Hindalco, or Tata Steel, or names like Coal India and ONGC, this entire side of the market, commodities, had a very good going for itself. And of course, there was Tata Steel, which was reacting well to the brokerage upgrades as well. Eternal, these were some of the other names that performed fairly okay. Technology pulled back, so it's like one day up, one day down for tech. Today was one of the up days, so HCL Tech, Tech Mahindra, etc. These names were up and about. The losers on the Nifty included names like Asian Paints, Cipla, and Tata Motors. Mid-caps, now this is where the action was. Let me talk to you about the high flyers. A lot of these numbers, a lot of these stocks responding very well to numbers. ITD Cementation, Sai Life, then there were others. Novama had a very good session, 7% higher. And some of the PSUs like Ircon, Railtel, Mishra Dhatu, all of them had a good day. The downside included names like Sirma and REC. The key challenge for the market is now going to be the Chinese outperformance. The Hang Seng was up 2.2% today. It's already up about 3.5% for the week. And the critical question is, will FPIs make a tactical shift towards China, given the valuation comfort and the good news on the US-China trade deal? That could put some pressure on flows coming to us in the near term. And that's a big watch point over the next couple of days.
All right, Surbi, many thanks for joining us. From equities to commodities, crude oil prices softened after nearing 2-week highs. This after industry data showed that U.S. inventories rose last week. Meanwhile, gold prices are down. In fact, they've eased after the trade tensions between U.S. and China dented safe haven demand. Profit booking has also followed, which, as we've been seeing, has weighed on the yellow metal. The wholesale price index easing to its lowest level in 13 months for the month of April, led by a fall in prices of food, manufacturing goods and fuel. Wholesale inflation coming in at 0.85% as against over 2% in March. Food inflation declined to 2.55% and manufactured products inflation decreased to 2.62%. Retail inflation also slid to a 6-month low in April, so good news continues there on the inflation front. In a big boost for India's semiconductor drive, the Union Cabinet has approved the setting up of a new semiconductor unit in Jewar in UP. Now, the plant will be a joint venture between Foxconn and the HCL Group. The project will have an outlay of 3,700 crore rupees and will have the capacity to generate 36 million chips per month. Speaking at the briefing, Ashwini Vaishnav, the minister, said that this will create 2,000 direct jobs. He also added that the plant will meet 40% of domestic demand. Take a look.
Foxconn, yes, this is the second attempt they have made. The partner they have selected is a very good partner. Last time also they had their own internal reasons for not taking that unit forward. I don't want to comment on that. But HCL has a very long history of manufacturing electronics and computers. In this particular, they have come with a very specialized technology. This is a technology called wafer level packaging. And this is especially focused on the display driver chips. There, what we understand is that once this unit is there, the display panel will also come to India. So this will more or less meet about 40% of India's capacity.
Well, that's Ashwini Vaishnav there on the decision taken by the Cabinet to clear the joint venture between Foxconn and the HCL Group to set up a chip manufacturing facility in Jewar in UP. The U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer has clarified that the baseline tariff of 10% on all imports into the U.S., irrespective of country of origin, is here to stay. Speaking to CNBC, Greer said that U.S. officials are in active discussion with several countries to reduce additional tariffs. He also said he plans to meet India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal very soon.
The focus of this agreement and the talks over the weekend were really to address the current escalated situation, which was tantamount to an embargo, which was not sustainable for either side. So we're able to get to a position where the United States still has substantial tariffs on China. China retains some, not nearly as much as we did, but we're in a position where we can actually talk. We can do it constructively. And to your point, taking down non-tariff barriers, of which there are many, China's the largest challenge by far on that front. That will take time, but the Chinese, they want to talk about it, we want to talk about it, and we'll see where that leads. I'm going for my standing call with the Indian Commerce Minister, who's my counterpart on trade matters. Then this afternoon, I'm flying to Korea to meet with the Korean Trade Minister over the next coming days, as well as trade ministers from many other Asian countries who are gathering for APEC meetings. So all of this is happening in parallel, and we are happy to move as quickly as other parties are willing to move. Everyone saw the UK move very quickly. In Switzerland, in between all the meetings with the Chinese, I met with the Swiss president. They want to accelerate things. So we're moving as quickly as we possibly can with folks who want to be ambitious. We just want to make sure we have secure supply chains, we get as much production back home as possible, and having a 10% global tariff, that's going to help reduce the trade deficit, which is the primary driver of the whole program.
Well, that's the U.S. Trade Representative. Now, speaking of China, India has rejected Beijing's attempts to rename certain places in Arunachal Pradesh. Officials from the Ministry of External Affairs have said that China's attempts will not alter the reality that Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India. This is China's 5th attempt to rename places in the state. The boundary dispute between India and China over Arunachal Pradesh has been a long-standing source of friction. Beijing has repeatedly claimed that the state is a part of historical Tibet. Back to corporate news, Tata Motors says the company plans to intensify its passenger vehicle launches in the current fiscal year. Speaking to my colleague Parikshit Luthra, the company's CFO PB Balaji said that driving up sales in the electric fleet segment will be a priority. Added that Jaguar Land Rover will look for alternate markets and will accelerate its growth in the UK and the European market. Take a look.
Overall demand situation as far as India is concerned is, I would say, is modest, is decent. not scorching. At the same time, neither is there any major concern at this point in time. So I would expect modest growth coming into this year. On the commercial vehicle business, I think the underlying fundamentals of the growth is very much intact. On the passenger vehicle growth, I think we did have a lukewarm growth last year. Nothing much to talk about last year. And I would suspect that this year would be an year where it will be modest growth once again and gradually build back as the year progresses. In this kind of external environment that we are currently facing, which is a bit unclear, because one is, of course, it's challenging. The other is also we are not clear what exactly how it plays out. Take the UK-US tariff, for instance. We welcome really the deal that has been done, which is now reducing tariffs from 25% to 10%. But it has gone up from 2.5 to 10, number one. Number two, even that reduction, we are not clear when does it become effective? Is it applicable for parts? Is it applicable retrospectively? So those are questions that are still out there, and we are hopeful to get clarity on that. US is probably likely to be having a lower growth next year compared to what we had last year. And therefore, we need additional sources of growth. The first market that is looking very good for us is UK, and we would intend to accelerate that.
And you can catch that entire conversation with Tata Motors CFO PB Balaji on Motor and Centimeter at 6 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. right here on CNBC-TV18. The big global story: tech giant Microsoft is set to lay off around 6,000 people across geographies, levels and departments, though this will be about 3% of its workforce. It will be the second largest layoff exercise that the tech giant is implementing. In a statement to CNBC, the company said, and I quote, "We continue to implement organizational changes necessary to best position the company for success in a dynamic marketplace." Analysts also believe that the organizational change will help Microsoft achieve its $80 billion capital spend target for this fiscal. Electronic giant Sony's operational income ahead of street estimates, however, dropped 11% on an annual basis. The company also announced a share buyback of up to $1.7 billion. And defense equipment manufacturer Hindustan Aeronautics surging in trade after its profit and margins both ahead of street expectations. Net profit fell by nearly 8% year-on-year basis, but that was higher than what the profit was higher than what was expected. Revenue also fell by 7%. Meanwhile, margins came in at 38.6%. Management said they are working on improving working capital and execution schedule of advanced light helicopters. We will head into a break, but up next, Justice B.R. Gavai takes oath as the 52nd Chief Justice of India. He's the first practicing Buddhist and the second person from the scheduled caste community to lead the nation's judicial system. That and more when we return. In international news, Israeli forces have intensified attacks on Gaza, killing at least 65 Palestinians since midnight. Missiles hitting 2 hospitals in the region, killing 45 people, including 22 children. Israel claimed it targeted a Hamas command center that was operating under the hospital. Russia, China and the UK have rejected a US and Israel plan for distributing aid in Gaza and said they've urged Israel to lift the 2-month blockade on Gaza. Ukraine's Zelensky has maintained that he will leave Turkey's capital of Ankara to attend the peace talks in Istanbul only if Russian President Putin is present. Moscow has not clarified if the Russian leader will attend the negotiations in Istanbul. Meanwhile, European leaders have indicated that they will press ahead with further sanctions against Russia if the talks in Turkey do not result in a ceasefire. Justice B.R. Gavai took oath as the 52nd Chief Justice of India. President Murmu administered the oath. Justice Gavai will have a tenure of over 6 months. He is the first Buddhist Chief Justice and only the second Chief Justice from the scheduled caste community. Ashmit joins us to give you a brief profile of India's 52nd Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Ashmit.
Well, Justice B.R. Gavai assuming charge as India's 52nd Chief Justice. The President today administered the oath to the new CJI in the presence of the Prime Minister as well as the entire top deck of the government. Now, bear in mind, this is for the records book. He'll only be the second judge from a scheduled caste community to come to the top chair of the Indian judiciary. He will, however, have a brief tenure of just a little over 6 months. He's due to retire in November of this year. Now, speaking of his journey, he began his journey in 1985, first as a lawyer. In 2003, he was elevated to the Bombay High Court, and in 2019 he was elevated to the highest court of the country, the Indian Supreme Court. And since then, he's had a prolific body of work, over 700 benches, over 300 judgments that he's authored. And speaking of judgments, in January of 2023 is when he was a part of the bench that had upheld the 2016 demonetization exercise. Later that year, in 2023, in December, is when he was a part of a bench that had upheld the abrogation of Article 370. Cut to 2024, he was a part of a bench that struck down electoral bonds and their legality. Subsequently, he also was a part of a 7-judge bench that had granted states the right to subclassify the SC/ST quota. And further, in December of last year is when he had come down heavily on bulldozer demolition by various state governments as a form of penal action. So a phenomenal body of work. The Indian judiciary looking now to him for leadership for the next 6 months.
Ashwath, many thanks. The government has said it has enough coal to cater to power demand, which is expected to peak this month due to heat waves in some states. Government sources tell CNBC-TV18 that thermal power plants have enough coal to last at least 25 days. Abhimanyu is back with us with more. Abhi.
While the mercury is rising across the country, ample coal is available at pit heads. That's the word coming in from the government. Government sources have told CNBC-TV18 that around 25 days of coal stock is available at pit heads and thermal power stations across the country. Now, this is despite an increase in temperatures which has been noted in the past few days. Also, there have been several patterns with respect to different regions, and these regional patterns are also governing the kind of power demand in respective regions. While places like Gujarat and Telangana have witnessed heat waves already, and due to several heat waves being witnessed, the projected peak demand for power has already been witnessed in these particular states. However, in places in North India, there have been several showers and several reliefs in terms of rain, and that has led to some cooling down of temperatures, which has ensured till now that the projected peak demand has not been achieved. It remains to be seen how the situation is going to pan out, even as the government is working to improve last mile connectivity in terms of transportation of coal and logistics to ensure that it's not just high production of coal, but also last mile connectivity, which will boost power generation and will provide ample coal not just to the power sector, but also to the non-power sector like the steel sector. The government is also looking to beneficiate coal in a large way to ensure that purification of coal takes place even before transport, to improve overall logistical efficiency and to also save on infrastructural costs while transportation of coal.
Abhimanyu, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a minute with more.